By 2028, nearly half of large enterprises will move AI into private environments, not for ideology, for survival. Because once AI moves from pilot to production, the stakes change. It's no longer about generating tokens, it's about protecting data, controlling cost, and making sure your digital workforce actually shows up to work. So in today's episode, we'll unpack why private AI is accelerating and what it takes to run it at scale. The conversation will cover the economics of inference, the operational reality of agentic AI, and why hybrid architectures are becoming the default, not the exception. Joining me on the episode are Mike Taylor, CTO at Worldwide Technology, Chris Wolf, Broadcom's Global Head of AI and Advanced Services, and Chad Olds from NVIDIA, three operators in the middle of what enterprise AI is becoming: hybrid, production grade, and cost accountable. This is the AI Proving Ground podcast from Worldwide Technology. Today's show starts with the shift itself. Why now? And what's really driving enterprise leaders to bring AI closer to home? So let's jump in. Okay, well, gentlemen, out in virtual land, thank you for joining. Chris and Chad, how are you both this afternoon?
Doing well. Appreciate you inviting us here. Anything with WWT and Broadcom is always fun to join.
100%. That's what I said to myself in kindergarten I'd be doing right about now.
Love it. And Mike, thanks for hanging out with me here in the studio. How are you?
I'm doing well. Wouldn't miss this. This is going to be great.
Excellent. Chris, I do want to start with you. So, I was reading an IDC report before we started recording here, and it showed that by 2028, some 40% of large enterprise organizations are expected to shift their AI workloads to private environments. Now, I'm wondering if we can just start with the why. Is this something that's more about mitigating risk, or is it more about actively pursuing more of a value stream? Why are we seeing this shift right now unfold?
Yeah, I think it's both, actually. It's certainly, you have risk, you have compliance concerns. There's a lot of legal gray area in some of this space today where, like, to give you a specific example, you take any standard NDA that a company would have with a partner or a customer, and there's going to be some clause around non-disclosure to third parties. Now, where does a public cloud LLM sit in that? If you don't have full visibility of the chain of trust and you can't prove that via an audit, then that's a third party, right? That's how a lot of our customers are interpreting that clause. And some are being a little more bold, but there's a lot of others that are saying, you know what, legal precedent isn't clear. I don't want to be the one to set the precedent. So, you have the privacy concerns that are absolutely legit, but the other side of this is cost. When you're owning or leasing infrastructure, you don't have to build your own data center if you don't have it, right? If you just even lease capacity, where it's capacity you own, the pricing dynamics shift as well. Like you're paying now a flat rate in most cases for the infrastructure. You're not paying for the token anymore, and you can fully optimize it. So we see cost reductions anywhere from 30% to 50%, even higher, for AI inference. So it's not saying you're going to use this for every use case, but when you're thinking about production AI inference, where quality and control matter, right, and cost, then this is absolutely what we continue to see as that trend.
Yeah, I think I would add. Yeah, I'd add one other. I fully agree with that. One other thing that I'm seeing is AI's moved to production now, and production happens in a lot of places, right? It's not just in the one data center that you got GPUs from initially, and you started to run all your stuff in. You've got your first model up and running. Now you're trying to inference, and that might happen, still in that cloud data center, but a lot of it is going to happen on-prem, and a lot of it's going to happen in the edge. And so, you can't just have it sitting in one place anymore. So just by the nature of how pervasive AI is going to be in all of our customers' business processes, it has to be everywhere. Therefore, just by definition, it's got to go hybrid.
No, absolutely. Mike, bring you into the conversation here. I think we see a lot about, private AI or private cloud as, talking about GPUs or managed platforms. What right now, as we sit in the market heading into the bulk of 2026, what actually qualifies for the concept of private AI?
Yeah, I think that the important point there that was brought up, I think we've gone from, I think both from a market perspective as well as in terms of how our customers are thinking about it, is it isn't about a single data center or a single physical location where these these algorithms and computation are going to happen. It's already, we're starting to see that proliferate out. And I think, there are two sort of forces that come into that. And by the way, I think, the panel here would agree. We've seen kind of these themes play out in the past. Like I think we can draw some similarities from it. But as we think about prior edge compute, we think about the advent and introduction of robotics beyond kind of just industrial use cases alone. We need to assume that these functions or these computations are going to be happening, anywhere from, as we're seeing, our laptops, our phones, to hospitals, clinics, branches, et cetera. And you need an extensible architecture and ecosystem to be able to support that, those different flavors and different versions. I think one piece I would build on, Chris, in terms of your comment about risk, compliance, data sovereignty as well, is I think the cost to, 2 or 3 years ago, and I want your feedback on this too, both of you, but the idea or the cost of potentially training your own foundational model, we really kind of thought, I think 3 or 4 years ago, like that's going to be like 8 really big companies that are going to go out and do that. And I think definitely the case that the base or foundational models are going to be there, but more and more interest from customers on how do I, in a controlled environment, train this model on just my data or just the influences that I want to apply to it for the purposes of the intellectual property I've collected, the points of view that I have that bring differentiation to the market. And for me, at least personally, like 3 or 4 years ago, guys, I would have thought like, oh, wow, that's going to be really, really expensive or difficult to do. And I think we've seen things from DeepSeek to other releases here from the model makers that afford us the opportunity to think more creatively about the what's possible in a private AI environment.
Well, I think we all thought that, right? It was, you've got Musk saying it's going to be billions to train an AI, and he's not wrong. Right. But, all the models, especially the open models now, and we're really focused on open models. Lots of companies are focused on open models now. I don't see a strong reason for folks to train theirs from scratch almost ever now. You're much better RAG and fine tuning and things like that. I think the other thought is a lot of our customers now, they're starting to focus on, like, I feel like every company should be a model creator now. What you have internally, the most valuable thing, we've been saying it since, data lake, data swamp, data, whatever you want to call it, but your data is your most valuable asset. You want your data sitting inside of your LLM that you're using. And in a lot of cases, we're working with customers that say, wait a minute, my data is super valuable. This is a new revenue stream for me. I don't just need to give the data to other people or sell it to them as it sits. I can just train this LLM to do it. And now I can sell this service. So it's turning so many companies that we work with that are just very CapEx or physical goods focused. And it's turning them into services companies as well. So I totally agree. Like, fine tuning these things is the way to go moving forward. Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, I'd say you got to be smart, right? I mean, it's building gigawatt data centers to try to train a mega LLM is not something that the average enterprise would need or want to do. And starting with what's already out there and fine tuning is absolutely the pattern. I think what we haven't seen fully play out yet is really the emergence of domain-specific small language models. So that's going to take a little bit more time. That's going to, I think, further drive down efficiencies and really make things more interesting. Like, there's some really good ones, right? If you're looking at like language translation as a good example, very common generative AI use case. There's a lot of good stuff already out there in open source that you can take advantage of. And as these start to proliferate, I think the other thing that you're thinking about here, as you're bringing AI to your data centers or your edge sites, is the energy demand, right? So we see the pressure on the power grid. If you look at some of the estimates, the energy demand is going to more than double by 2030. And certainly supply can't keep up with that. So you have to look at what are some of the techniques I can use to really lower overall energy requirements for AI, and being smart about your model choice is one of them.
Yeah, Chris, Chad mentioned, that data is your greatest asset, and you're talking about, power here at the tail end of, your recent answer. As it relates to kind of breakthroughs for what private AI delivers, we hear from so many of the organizations, Mike, that we talk to on a regular basis, talking about how, we've adopted AI or to a certain extent, but we can't scale it to, a certain extent. So from a private AI perspective, is it that data control, or, what is the big value there that's helping us scale with our AI initiatives? Does it have more to do with data, cost predictability, kind of an all the above type of answer?
Yeah, I think it's a few things. So, data organizations should have a hard principle on data, which is it's your data. You shouldn't have to move your data into somebody else's proprietary data repo format just to gain the benefits of AI. That should be just something that you're not willing to cross, because if something better comes along, like, how do you get your data back? How much is that going to cost you, right? The exit costs can be enormous. So data is a core principle. Being able to bring the AI model to wherever your data happens to be, not compromising on that, not having to necessarily rewrite applications to gain the benefits. And the other side of this too is private AI to us is about being able to safely operate AI in any environment. And that's an important distinction, because there's a lot of focus on the AI token. And I think the token is the easy part. Like, generating a token with the right infrastructure, right capacity is really not that hard. But how do you have observability? How do you have resiliency? How are you enforcing access controls? Especially with agentic AI, these are the things that keep people up at night. And this is where, when you're thinking about production private AI, which is where a lot of these use cases are, their production inference, it's having the tools, the controls, and the automation to really make it all happen and make it resilient and cost effective.
If I could just add to that, Chris, another pattern we would see there is, I think, again, if we were talking a year or two ago, it would have been about AI being kind of, sidecar to core business functions or business processes. As customers deploy more agentically, that computational exercise needs to happen as close to, if not embedded in the application, because the data isn't in some lake somewhere. It's not in it. It's happening real time in the applications that people are using. And, it speaks to, again, kind of, data center, edge, cloud, like, we just have to presume and really have seen already, the more agentic of an architecture that we've deployed here internally. I mean, you have a bunch of internal initiatives where you're using your stuff, not just the work you're doing with customers, but the more that we go through that pattern, the more the recognition is, the closer we can get, I'd say really that agent working to the applications themselves or the data that's being generated in that point in time, the better results we get, the more accurate we are. And that just feels very different in terms of a consciousness in the market today than what was out there as people were, broadly thinking about agentic versus practically implementing it into a business process.
Yeah, it's interesting, Chad. I'm going to spin to you here. Mike, you're talking about how the data needs to be kind of as close to that, location as possible. A little bit of a devil's advocate here question, Chad, but what are the implications for moving to that type of process? Are there any trade-offs that need to be considered by organizations, recognizing that all decisions have some type of impact down the line?
Yeah. Now there are. I think it's a really important point to focus on where agents are going to work. Agents are going to be everywhere as well, right? And latency matters. Latency matters a lot. Latency matters. Where is your data sitting? Also, choice matters. Folks want to control their own costs. They don't want to get stuck. Chris, you bring up a great point. Getting your data out of places can be really hard. But when you do move to hybrid, there is something that you do have to consider. It takes more planning, right? When you look at cloud-based APIs, it's very easy, and it's why at the beginning I told everyone. I mean, I say back in September of 2022, all the way to probably a year in, I told folks, nope, just go into hit one of the cloud APIs. Be very, very careful with your data, but hit those and use those, because you have to spin up the infrastructure. You have to know the people. You have to work with the right folks. The beauty here is, I'd say with so many of our deployments now, I could name probably 5 customers that we're working on with WWT and with Broadcom to deploy this stuff. The good news is now it's very feasible to do. You do lose some of the convenience of being able to just like say, I want to run something now if you don't already have the infrastructure set up. But anyone that didn't realize they needed the infrastructure set up by now is probably not paying attention to the right things.
Mike, I'm going to ask you too, because I just before we started recording, you're talking about how this is a very relevant conversation that's happening in real conversations with customers. From those conversations, are you sensing that the market is ready right now from a maturity standpoint, or are we still in an early stages perspective?
Yeah, I still think we're early stages, but I don't think, I'm kind of an optimist on this stuff. I don't think we give ourselves enough credit sometimes in terms of, the rate and scale that we're moving here. The real barrier to adoption, from our broad-based adoption within our customers is data maturity.
Yeah.
And I think, Chris, to some of the points that you made earlier, I think in some part that has been created by this sense of everyone building data lakes or, data repositories around systems of record. And they got pretty good at that, but there's so much more now that language, these models can interpret that we didn't even think about, in terms of collecting, structuring. And, in the most extreme cases, we have customers that are, taking things off of tape and trying to get them back into the, the corpus of data that they're able to include in these models. And so I think our limitations are not in a technical sense in most of the engagements that we're working in. It's to what extent are we able to collect the data? To what extent can we tolerate, in the early days, the fact that I don't think it's been ever a better time to have imperfect data, because these models can help us sort that out, whereas before we needed every I dotted and every T crossed. It's like, okay, we can go through this. For certainly health and safety is a different category than some of the business productivity things that we're doing. So I'd like to give us a little more credit than we're due here. I think the most popular use case that we're working with, and I think this is right squarely in what we're discussing here today in terms of intellectual property and the importance of having control of these things, are coding assistants, and how this has helped developers and really engineering in general, I think, become more productive. But in fact, the conversations we're having with our customers is having their code base in a, somewhere else, or, not knowing exactly where that is or who's kind of in control of it, is something that we continue to, work through with our customers. And if they're doing that for developers today, we see the opportunity that automation engineers and other engineering or, interpretive kind of roles and functions across the enterprise are going to benefit from tools like this. The coding assistant, to me, is just sort of the beginning.
Yeah.
And we're going to kind of play out some of the gates that we're working through in that context across multiple personas, within an enterprise.
Hey, you just brought up an awesome point on not waiting until the data is perfect to start fitting them into these models and using them. I see, I was go through all the different databases and all the different analytics tools that we all used. The data being extremely accurate and extremely well formatted was paramount. Now it's not. And I do see kind of a split in how companies handle this. Some companies still think the way of, we got to get this perfect. We can only take data from this source because this is our source of truth. You can put weights on the data, right? So I think it's important that organizations understand, like we do this a lot internally now, is you can, as long as you make sure your data is safe, as long as you make sure you're putting the right data in there, it doesn't have to be super well structured. In fact, we're shocked all the time by how well it handles some of this data.
This episode is supported by Eaton. Eaton provides power management solutions to ensure systems reliability and efficiency. Optimize your power infrastructure with Eaton's innovative products.
Yeah, Chris, I think you were about ready to jump in there, but Mike had just mentioned about how data maturity still stands as the number one blocker here to scaling anything for that matter, but in this case, private AI. What other blockers exist out there that has to kind of be a 1, 2, 3, or a checklist of items that organizations need to get to execute effectively?
Yeah, I think there's a few things that you have to think through here, and I want to go back to Chad's earlier point around how do I think about my application portfolio overall, from say a cloud-based AI service to an on-prem or private service? And one of the things that we had done very early on is to align around an OpenAI compatible API. We expose that through our API gateway, so that if you started building an application on OpenAI or a compatible platform, you're simply just changing a URL pointer to hit our gateway as opposed to a cloud service. And now it's completely running in a private environment without having to do any code modification. So there's tricks you can do like that. You don't have to fall into some of these all or nothing traps. And, as you start to think about that initial private deployment, because this comes up a lot, like people say, well, where do I start? And I say, well, start in the cloud. Because if you don't have a use case, you don't know the use case, leverage on-demand capacity to find it. When you move to decide, I want to run this as a production inference service, the economics far outweigh a public cloud model today by a long stretch. We've continued to rerun the math just to check our own assumptions. And you can put it all in a spreadsheet. You can do the per token cost comparisons, and it's fairly consistent. And I mention that because when you get to that first use case, now you can start to size infrastructure for it. You make the investment, you stand it up, and then you're going to have times where you're going to have unused capacity. Now you can use that unused capacity now for additional experimentation and start to do some more GPU as a service. So you're maximizing utilization of that capacity all the time. And this is where having the right automation tools can really make a huge difference for an organization. I can't tell you how many times I've seen somebody bring AI capacity into a data center. They redo all of the data center power infrastructure to support the AI capacity, and they wind up being able to use maybe like 40% of it. Yeah. It's like, how much did you waste, right? Just with a really poor design, versus looking at techniques that would allow me to subscribe or even oversubscribe my capacity. Like you can set up spot instances for some of your research workloads so that I am able to dynamically shut them down if I have, say, my most critical production inference service has a GPU failure. Like these are things that you can start to apply very early on, again, with the right partners. And that's why I think you have the three of us together here, because these are the things we can help organizations with.
The tools point is really important when it comes to orchestration, because once you saturate GPUs in the cloud, versus saturated GPUs on-prem, the cost is pretty clear. The area that folks have been concerned about historically is, well, how do I keep my utilization high, right? Like I don't want to pay for things I'm not using. But there's so many schedulers and orchestration tools now. You've got Slurm, you've got RenAI, you've got a lot of different tools now that can help you not just split up the GPU so they can be used by others, but put priorities, right? You may have 5 groups that all say they want 40% of the GPU capacity. But every time that happens, they go to sleep, they're in different places, they're running big jobs, they're not running jobs. There's plenty of schedulers out there now that can make full use of the on-prem private AI.
Yeah, I'm gonna steal the moderator seat here for a second, because just as you both were talking through that, first, so much of what you're saying is resonating with what we're doing and seeing in our AI proving ground, and you both have been fantastic partners in kind of building those capabilities out. And a couple of the trends that we've talked about that just really kind of triggered a thought, and I want to get both of your perspectives on this, is that, the more agentic we get, the closer that these agents get to applications, and frankly, the more important those agents are to the conduction of business processes and how we service our customers and everything else. Like those agents become production applications themselves, right? They're just as important as, the employees we have on the ground that show up every day and, interface with our customers and one another to serve the markets that we work in. As you think about the work that you all are doing to help our customers operate, with consistency, with quality, with all the things that kind of came with the advent of virtual machines and container-based architectures, is like these high performance architectures, these AI workloads need the same care and feeding. And you mentioned the run AIs and some of the other things that are, can carve up the hypervisor or the GPUs rather, and provide those services. But I know there's a lot of investment, both internally and acquisitions you all are making I'd love to kind of give you a moment to kind of share, maybe starting with, Chris, on your side, the investments that you're making in helping customers more reliably operate these high performance architectures and AI workloads.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because we've been really focused on this and seeing, really investing in the shift to production inference before it became mainstream. And most folks that you talk to today, they're going to tell you in the next couple of years, your AI inference capacity relative to training capacity is probably somewhere in the 60 to 70% range. So there's a huge momentum going in this direction. We purpose built our solution for these things. And really, the way we thought about it was, if you're going to do AI at scale, you got to have your infrastructure as a service house, your IaaS layer really set up really well, right? That house has to be in order. So we do that with Cloud Foundation and giving you a baseline. And that's built on technology such as our distributed resource scheduler, because AI capacity automation is not just about GPUs, it's CPUs, it's memory, it's network IO, it's storage IO, right? It's very complex. And this is technology we've been evolving for more than the last 20 years now. We have native hooks into Run AI, so these tools can work together. We have hooks into the dynamic resource allocation project. So that's one piece of it, is that IaaS layer. Then as you go up the stack, we've done a lot of work too, just to make service enablement really easy. And the way I like to explain this, and the way we like to partner, is we look at these as services that you'd get inside a server operating system. They're there. You can use what you want to use. If you want to use a partner service, we're like, hey, cool, no problem. That's good for us too. Everything that we've done northbound is open source. So you have CNCF conformant Kubernetes. I mentioned DRA support. Our the way we do model governance was one of the first in the industry. Actually, it's based on open source Harbor. AI models are shipped as containers. You do not need a proprietary tool to govern containers. You can use tools like Harbor. It's already there, right? So we made that really simple. We have a CLI that will hook all of these tools into NVIDIA's NGC cloud. You can hook into Hugging Face if you want to pull down open source models. Again, these are all just native developer constructs. We support NVIDIA's Triton Inference Server, and if you want to use like open source, we support VLLM, Llama CPP for different types of inference engines. And then as you go across, we have our own agent builder. So we've done a lot of work to bring all of these AI services in. And I'd say the other industry first for us, if you compare us to some of these other infrastructure providers, all of our AI services, they're just included free with our IaaS platform. Everybody else is charging them as an add-on, but to the point you made, Mike, AI is going to be in every application. So if it's just going to be there in every application, how on earth can you just charge to enable AI at this point? We just think it's table stakes, and that's how we've packaged our software, and we look forward to our competitors following us, because that'll be good for customers.
Yeah, Chad, build on that a little bit. What's your reaction to a little bit about what Chris is saying, but then also, how is NVIDIA and Broadcom working together just to make all of this easier? Chris had mentioned how the economics are there if and when you're ready to make it happen. So what are the two of you all doing together to really enable all that?
Yeah, so one of the things that we love about our relationship with Broadcom and VMware before was that we all have almost this intrinsic belief that AI should be open source as much as possible, right? It's so important. And you see it with some of the earliest, kind of the grandfathers of AI, how focused they were on trying to keep things open. Mm-hmm. And it's not just because, we want everyone to be able to use it. That's important, but open source makes things better. I started my career at Red Hat. I got a firm belief in that while I was there, which was not the standard at the time. But you've just seen it blossom. And because Broadcom and NVIDIA have embraced open source so deeply, it's really easy for us to work together, right? So, Chris said it perfect. You want to use Triton, you want to use VLLM. We're a huge contributor to VLLM. We love to package up Triton and do a NIM to make it a microservice and really easy to deploy. Right. It all works really, really well with what Chris and the Broadcom teams are doing. We've been working together over a decade. You look back to vGPU and a bunch of the other pieces that we work together with. I think that partnership being based on kind of a foundation of everyone believing open source is important. It's also just to allow tools to collaborate has made it super easy to partner with Broadcom. And it's something that we continue to embrace. If you look at, look at some of our acquisitions, right? We acquired RunAI. RunAI is a scheduler. Chris mentioned it. Their stuff plugs in beautifully. They work together. But we bought RunAI because the GPU orchestration was becoming extremely important. And yes, the cloud providers have kind of figured it out, but everyone needed to be able to use it. So we buy them. We bought SchedgeMD, right? Slurm is extremely important when you start looking into the HPC environments. All of these have just massive open source components or are entirely open source. Now, our latest iteration of this, if you look at the Nemotron models, we love all the models out there. We love them because most of them run on NVIDIA GPUs, right? But one thing we found is open models can be really expensive to train. And even if they're smaller models, it can be extremely expensive. And it's also, there's not a lot of organizations that are incented to have both open weights, which is what you hear of open models these days, and open training data sets. So that open training data set is something that isn't talked about as much whenever we talk about open models. So our customers were very clear they needed it. NVIDIA has a reason to create these models, right? We want AI to become pervasive. We want GPU usage to be out there. And we want, especially when we start going into the sovereign AI path, which we could have a whole hour discussion on that, especially when you go into that, the open models are very important. And so we've created many different models in Nemotron, whether you want to do anything with voice to just very large models, like you would see with some of the other providers. That basis of open source, it just makes it really, really easy to work together.
Mike, and then to, I guess, kind of take your question that you had when you very effectively took the moderator mic away.
That. Yeah, sorry about that.
No problem at all. Anytime you want to jump in, I'm happy to have your questions. But, I think you're kind of asking the two of them, what is this, evolving story and where are you all coming from? Understanding what Chris and Chad just said, how are you synthesizing that for our customers who are just trying to make sense of a very complex landscape?
Yeah, I think it is outside of the data, the operation of these environments at scale are some hard yards right now, for our customers to carry. And, I think the work that's happening around, making these environments more accustomed to what they're used to operating is some of the, that's some of the work that's being done here, frankly, in terms of integrating these two platforms together. I still think there is a sort of an emerging recognition that as you get into more agentic, these are, I don't have a better name. We're gonna have to work on it, but these agents really are, they're coworkers. They just happen to be doing this in a digital sense. And when they don't show up to work, things don't get done. Or when they're not performing well, things don't get done. So I think it's all the integration kind of that we talked about here, but it's also this idea that, and you both could, I welcome your insights on this. Again, I need help with it, but is like, this is as important a services-based architecture as we've ever built, in terms of these microservices are now agents. They're people, digital humans that are doing this work. And how we imagine, I even look at some of the functions we have here internally, we're going to have 10, 20,000 agents here, working inside of the organization that we have. How are we ensuring that they're all showing up to work, that they're productive, that they're talking to one another and doing so in a secure sense? The power of that 24/7 availability and the productivity that's going to bring in conjunction with our employees, the people who are doing some of these jobs and supporting them. It's really important work. It's still sort of kind of developing here in terms of how we're going to keep track of it. But if you are a CIO, CTO, application leader, and you're thinking about the 5,000 apps that you use to run your enterprise today, you're going to have 5,000 apps and you're going to have 50,000 digital workers. And, our collective responsibility is to how do we best operationalize the management, the productivity, the security and resiliency of all of those assets. And it's going to be hard yards to come, but I think we're seeing it, or at least we are with our customers. And I speak for the folks in the panel here. I think we're seeing more and more of that realization and recognition. So it's an exciting one to chase. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, Mike, you really put it well with the football metaphors there. The hard yards to come. It's like the Philadelphia Eagles offense this year. So I can definitely relate as a Eagles fan. But I think on the hard part, the thing that we've kind of talked around here that I want to just circle back to is NVIDIA's done a phenomenal job with NIMs and inference microservices. And the magic in all of this is you have more than 100 of these things, and Chad's going to know the exact number. But what's really cool is when you're trying to put a model on an accelerator and on infrastructure, you need the right device driver. You need the optimized kernels. You need the optimized framework for these. So there's this entire software stack that has to get certified around that model or agent that you're looking to deploy or pair. We do all of this end to end. So I can just pick from the catalog. I can drop it down onto my infrastructure layer. And that full software stack is just delivered. It just runs. So if you think about how fast you can iterate and experiment, right, and just try new things, because to Mike's point, if I'm looking at tens of thousands of these things, you got to enable your teams to move fast. And that's what we've been able to do with our partnership.
Yeah. I love that, Chris. The tools are there. The tools are all there. And there's a lot of companies that are working hard to try and make them easy to use. I think there's a daunting aspect sometimes whenever you look at this and you're like, gosh, how do I enter this? How do I actually get into production? And I've got to say, just a plug for WWT on this. We work with a lot of very, very strong deployment partners that go in and they architect and they build and they deploy people. They do all those things to help the major customers be successful. WWT rivals some of the best of the really small partners that have their just AI geniuses, right? They can go head to head in a small environment or in an early architecture. I think the thing that is pretty incredible about WWT right now is I'm seeing that as those customers go from initial architecture to POC to, oh my gosh, this is actually working. Oh, this agent is actually helping, my customer service department. WWT has been able to deploy the right people with the skills, the AI skills necessary. It's a big piece to make those pervasive, in medium and especially large to huge organizations. I've seen it, and it's been impressive because you always wonder if, as these things scale, there's going to be enough people to help. Now, part of that is the work that the kind of work that Broadcom is doing to try and integrate all these things and make it an easy deployment. But the other part is just getting started and architecting. It takes some confidence. And I think that WWT has done that for a couple of our very, very large, very complicated customers.
I would just want to add that there's one other key difference that I've known, like Mike and I go back now, 10 or so years at this point. And the thing that I've really respected about WWT is, Chad, you nailed it with the tech prowess around AI. But what sets WWT apart is integrity. As a company culture, like WWT always does what's best for their customers or clients, and really always serves them in their best interest. And you can't say that about a lot of other vendors or providers that you might look to work with.
Well, we certainly appreciate those comments, and we appreciate the partnership from the two of you and your respective organizations as well. We are coming up a little bit at the bottom of the episode, so do have to hurry it up a little bit. Chad, I want to stay over with you for a moment. It certainly doesn't appear like the hybrid approach is going to be fading away. But how do you see those hybrid architectures, evolving as we start to explore what should be private, what should be public, what should be in between?
Yeah. It's a great question. I think what we're seeing right now with robotics, we're all hearing about humanoid robotics. People are questioning how real that's going to be. Now we just heard that Tesla is going to be taking a lot of their capacity in their manufacturing facilities and moving them over to humanoid robots. We're seeing robotics accelerate really, really quickly. And I think the why behind it is fun. So I'll take a slight detour. The fun part is I was working with Omniverse, which is kind of our metaverse digital twinning application before Gen AI really came out. Gen AI comes out and all of a sudden the acceleration just went parabolic. And the reason is because Gen AI can help train these robots in a simulation. And, we've got lots of examples now where in less than an hour, we're training new robots how to walk on unstable surfaces. So I think what that drives, to get back to your question, is the hybrid architecture is going to be absolutely critical. I think there's two major forces I see. One is people are moving to production and they're starting to say, ooh, maybe some of these workloads make more sense on infrastructure that I own, where I can know exactly what my performance is and my security is and all those things. So that's one of the major drivers. I think the other driver is going to be where the data sits and where the data needs to be worked on, right? In a lot of cases, you want it on the robot. You want it at the physical location that might be remote somewhere. And yeah, sure, you may throw the data back to some central repository one way or another. But I think that move in hybrid is going to be extremely, it's hard to overstate how transformational that move will be to all of us and all of our companies if it goes the way that we're starting to think it's going to happen.
Yeah, Chris, where do you see that boundary going? Is it going to just continue to be a little bit of a gray area for the foreseeable future?
Yeah, I think I'm seeing more and more folks get more intentional about it and understanding, what I can do in each environment. There's enough common design patterns here that are really helping us. You have tools like Run AI that have been focused on these environments for years now. There's things in open source like SkyPilot as an example that's really focused on some of these hybrid AI management and automation use cases. So there's work to do. But there's still, if we back up, like Mike's talked about agentic AI a couple times, the MCP protocol just got OAuth in August or September, right? So, figuring out sometimes, the hybrid architecture is one thing, but sometimes it's the basics. Like how am I doing tracing between multiple MCP agents? How can I prove to an auditor that these, like Mike said, all of your digital employees are not doing things they shouldn't do, or passing information to each other that one doesn't have access to or shouldn't, right? These are I think the low-hanging fruit that are going to be really critical for us as we start to evolve this forward. But I think the most important part on hybrid, though, is accepting the fact that private cloud is a legitimate deployment target for AI services. And what's happened that for me with multiple chief AI officers or chief data officers that I've talked to is when I explain the privacy, the control, and then the economics. Like if you can cut your costs in half and you choose not to do that, you're doing a disservice to your business. You're doing a disservice to your shareholders at that point. You truly are. Like, why wouldn't you do that? And if you're ambitious about AI and you can cut your costs in half and now you can double your AI initiatives, then awesome. Like, go for it, right? That's really the biggest blocker, I think, to hybrid right now is just some of the myths that are out there that were perpetuated by some of the mega hyperscalers that want to have all of your workloads and have all of your data. You don't have to do that. Like, we can help you. Like, come work with all of us. We'll show you how it's done.
Yeah. Well, recognizing that, and Mike, we'll end on you here. What has to change, either technically, operationally, or maybe even culturally, if private AI is going to continue to be more and more of a viable alternative? What has to change for it to become more of that kind of boring, predictable infrastructure that we know is going to deliver?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the innovation we talked about here today is what's driving that. And as we think about our business, and I appreciate the kind words from both of you, kind of, in terms of what we're doing together, and that I think having a high trust relationship with individuals that are squarely sitting in the spaces to try to solve these problems, and learning from the proving ground, giving you all feedback on what are the customers asking for, where do we stand, what do they care about. This is where I think the right partnerships, the right relationships, and I would say, for us, it's as important, what we do as to how we do it are equal parts important. And I think these conversations here today, from my perspective, represent where the market needs to go, where we are to an extent in terms of the progress that's been made. And as more and more of our customers understand, Chris, what you've laid out, Chad, the points you've supported in the discussion here as well, it's almost irresponsible not to be considering how you would take this on in terms of a private architecture that's going to, again, the AI that we have today is not the AI we're going to have tomorrow. Sure. And the proliferation of these agents and how they're going to impact our productivity is exciting times ahead for us.
Absolutely. Well, to the three of you, I know we're closing up on time here. Thank you so much for joining. Chris, Chad, thank you for joining virtually. Thank you for the partnership from the two of you, as well as Broadcom and NVIDIA. It's always a pleasure to catch up, and we hope to see you soon.
Likewise. Bye.
Okay, thanks to Mike, Chad, and Chris for joining. What we heard today is simple. Private and hybrid architectures aren't philosophical choices. They're operating decisions about where the data lives, how your agents behave, and whether you can scale AI without losing control of cost, security, or performance. This episode of the AI Proving Ground podcast was co-produced by Naz Baker and Kara Kuhn. Our audio and video engineer is John Knobloch. My name is Brian Felt. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.